I'm Ginger from In Sheep's Clothing Yarn Shop, and I'm here today to show you some of the interesting yarns for cowls and also some of the tools of the trade. Today the only way that you can start knitting is that you need to have knitting needles, and there's all different kinds of knitting needles. We have bamboo, we have wood needles, metal needles, and a lot of this, and they come in long and they come in short lengths like this. And the only difference with these needles are what you like. I used to like to use metal needles myself, and I found that now they're a little slippery for me, so I like to use the wood ones. Although sometimes your project will determine what you want to use. Sometimes you need that more slippery needle. Sometimes you want a needle that is going to hold on to your stitches a little bit more, like maybe a double pointed needle, or if you're working with really fine, small stitches. So those are the knitting needles, and then of course you want something to keep your knitting needles in, and needle cases are always great, and then having little bags like this to keep your tools together. Some of my favorite tools are Knit Check. It has a measure on it, and it has little holes on here with your sizes. So like say that you have a circular needle or even a straight needle that the sizes have worn off. Well, all you have to do is poke it through here, and whichever one your needle goes through, it's like, okay, this is a size 7 needle, which is exactly what the needle says. So this is very handy because sometimes you really need to have that. Also, it has this little handy gauge in here so that when you're doing, you want to check your gauge, you can put it against the stitches and then you can count. And some of you are saying gauge, what's gauge? We'll talk about that another time, but gauge is very important. Some other things that I like to have that that are a must are scissors. You have to have something that you can cut your yarn with. Stitch holders, especially when you're doing projects like sweaters, you need to hold stitches, and these come in all different sizes, so you want to use those. Another thing is when you're stitching your sweaters together, your tapestry needles, I happen to have a preference. These really great little needles here have a little curved tip, and they're great for when you're sewing because it catches those little stitches much more easily for you. So those are my favorite type of needle. Another thing that you need to have is your tape measure. That's really, really important to keep your measurements. Also, another little thing that I found out over the years is when you're using a tape measure, use the same one. Don't go, I did a sweater one time, and I had, probably like 3 different tape measures, and I measured all my ribbings with a different tape measure, and at the end of the project, I realized every ribbing was a different measurement. So use one tape measure at a time. And then crochet hooks. Sometimes even if you're not a crocheter, they come in handy if, say, you dropped a stitch and you want to catch it. You can use that hook to grab the stitch, and also you can pick up the stitch and catch it if it's gone down a little bit. It makes it easier. The other thing too is that your needles come in all different. Besides having a straight needle, you can have circular needles. One of my favorite things to work with are like little short straight needles. They're great for hats. They're great for working back. You don't have to just work in a round. You can work back and forth on them. Nice thing about that is, say you're taking a trip, say you're on a plane, and you know how tight they are in the plane. You don't have to worry about those knitting needles poking the person next to you. This is really, or also, lots of times when I'm working with 2 straight needles, I'm always dropping one of them. Imagine trying to have to keep picking up a needle when you're on the plane. So circular needle is really handy. They also come in different lengths. So say that besides making a hat, you're doing a sweater. Nice long needle. And these are interchangeables, which means that you can have the tips, and then you can have your cords. and you can have all different size cords. And so all you have to do is have one size tip needle, a bunch of cords, and you have lots of different options. You can also get different tips, short ones, longer ones, and they're very handy. So those are the most basic of your tools. Another tool that I like to use, but actually I probably use on a daily basis in the shop, is a skein winder. And what these are good for is some of your yarn will come in yarn balls. Other ones will come in things that are called skeins. And the way these are is when you open them up, you have this long skein. Now the thing is, when you open this up, you can take off your paper, and there's a knot that's going to keep it in place. Sometimes there'll be several, like here's another one here, and that just keeps the skein from getting tangled up. But I always ask, especially newbies, I want to make sure, I always ask them, you know how to wind a skein down, right? Because if you don't, if you try to knit off of this, you're going to end up with a big mess. It's going to look like your cat got into it. So what you want to do is the skein winder is you're going to take the skein, you're going to wrap it around the skein winder. And these are adjustable. So if you have a little skein, it'll go up and down. So once you've gotten the skein onto your skein winder, then it makes life very easy that all you have to do, whoops, I didn't get the other piece that was keeping this from being tangled. So all we have to do now is just wind this off. It's so easy. The other thing that you can do is if you don't have a skein winder, you can get a chair, you can put it around the chair. Maybe some of you remember holding onto the skeins for your moms or your grandmoms so they could wind. I remember I used to do it for my grandmother all the time. So you just wind this down. Now there's also another really handy dandy tool, and it's called a ball winder. And what it does is it clamps onto your table. You would attach your yarn onto it and you wind it, and it makes really quick work of winding this skein down into a really nice pull ball that you can pull from the inside and from the outside. Of course, I forgot to bring it with me, but I was also just reminded too that this particular yarn, if you notice, besides it being a gorgeous colorway, there's slubs in it. There's smooth, and then there's these big woolly slubs. When I use this on the ball winder, it tends to, it sometimes can get caught. So it's actually a better thing to just wind it like this and not end up destroying your ball winder. Another thing too is when you're winding a ball down, these are all these little details, and you learn these as you go. I don't like to wind my balls of yarn too tightly, because it kind of, especially if you let it sit for a while, it kind of takes the life out of your yarn. So what I do is I wind over my fingers, and I'll do it for a little bit. And then when I have enough wound on, I take my fingers out and I'll do it in another direction, again over my fingers. So what it does is it gives me a nice soft ball of yarn that will be nice and not all stretched out and have no life to it. So all you do is you just keep winding this ball down until it's all off of the skein. And this would have been done a lot faster for the ball winder, but oh well. And then once I have this off, I would like to show you how we made this really beautiful cowl. It's a super easy piece. It's very, very popular. And as you can see, the yarn comes in different colorways too. Also available in solids, which are nice, but most people really like the colors. And a lot of these, especially this one, is very springy. Perfect for right now in the summer. You can very simply make a scarf out of this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit this onto, I'm going to cast this onto a circular needle, and then it's going to be worked in the round. So you can see that it's just basically a round tube. And then there's this one here, and then there's this cowl that's also done in the round, the same yarn, but done in a slightly different way, so it has bobbles. And all I did with that was the yarn slubs are worked in a different manner. So I'm going to make really fast work of winding this down so that I can show you how we cast on and how we deal with the yarn slubs. Just a little background about myself as I'm doing this here is I have been knitting, crocheting, all kinds of crafts since I was a child. Between my mom and my grandmother teaching me, I learned all different kinds of things. Now, what I really like to do is a lot of knitting and crocheting, weaving and spinning. And those are all, I like anything that's fiber related, anything that has to do with yarn or thread or things that are going to be woven into fabric, anything that has to do with fiber. And the animals aren't so bad either. Just keep winding this down. Now this cowl also looks really, really great. You can wear it just as is, or you can get like a little shawl stick like this, and if you want, you can just kind of adjust it, and you put the shawl stick in, and it just gives it just a little different look, and that's really pretty. And a lot of people like to wear their cowls like that, especially if they're really long. Now this one, if you wanted to, this is we call a one skein wonder. So you can make this cowl with one skein. Of course, if you wanted to make it longer, then you can go into a second skein, or you can make it a little deeper. Every time I make this cowl, I tend to do it a little different. Sometimes I'll cast on, it's a basic pattern of either casting on 90 to 100 stitches. And depending on how the mood strikes me, I'll do either of the two. Sometimes what I like to do, and it's about 8 inches deep. You can make it deeper. A lot of people like to just knit until they run out of yarn, which will be a little bit deeper than what I did. And then another thing that you can do if you want a little more shaping for your cowl is you do about a couple of inches and then decrease 5 stitches evenly around the cowl. Do another inch or two. Do another 5 stitches evenly around the cowl, and it gives just a little bit of shaping, kind of fills in a little bit here, and doesn't look like, sometimes some of the cowls tend to look like a deflated tire wrapped around your neck, so it kind of gives you a little more shaping, which is kind of nice. I'm almost done with this. It still is a lot faster than doing it around a chair, because at least this is spinning around and it's kind of helping you wind as you go. And we're almost there, I promise. Now, I'm going to be showing you how to cast on. And I've learned not to assume that everybody knows the correct way to cast on. Not that there is a correct way. There's lots of different ways of casting on, but there's one particular way that most people know how, and a lot of people, that's their way to cast on. And I like them to learn a different way because it gives you a really better foundation for your knitting, a cleaner edge, and the casting I'm referring to is kind of like the looping on with your thumb method. Let's see, we'll just grab a needle here. So when you cast on, the first thing you have to do is you have to put on a slip knot. And no, that's not just tying the yarn onto your needle. That's not the way to go. What you do with a slip knot is you make this loop like that, and then you take the yarn and you go underneath the loop, and then you just pull up like this. The great thing about a slip knot is it's exactly that. You can slide it. Of course, I'm using it on the slub, which isn't the best place to do it on. I should do it on the smooth part. This is a bamboo and wool blend. So this part here is bamboo, and you can see it's very silky and shiny and smooth. So there's my slip knot. So it's adjustable. Now, what I like to do, a lot of people know this method. It's a thumb method, or the backward loop cast on. And it's okay, and there's actually times when that's a good cast on to use. But most of the time, my go-to cast on is a long tail. And that's where you have two long tails like this. And actually, I'm going to do this in a little different place because I want to make sure I get one of those slubs in my piece here. So what you do is you take both of those loops, both of those strands, and you work from both ends to put on the cast on your loop. I like to say that my fingers here are like a bird's beak, and I go through the two strands, drop down, I go through the front of the thumb, over the forefinger, and right through that thumb loop, just like that, and then I pull it down. And you just keep doing that, adding on your stitches. And then you just keep casting on. Now, what I would do for the cowl is, again, it's a lot of stitches, so 90 to 100 stitches we're going to cast on. I like to use, these needles come in, this is the 16-inch. I usually like to do like a 24 length. This is probably a 32 actually, but 24 is, and this is what the great thing about these needles. You have the tips, you have the cord, you screw it in, if I can see the hole, like that. And between the tip and the cord, it's going to give you a 24-inch length, which is a good length for this cowl. It's nice and comfortable. Although I've been known to use a 16-inch and just have them really squished on there. That's fine. So you just put those in there, and there's this great little key. There's a hole, and you just go through that hole, put the key in there. Again, if I can see it, there we go. And you just use it just to kind of hold on to, so you can just really kind of torque it like that. And that just tightens it up so it won't fall apart. So then once you have all those stitches cast on, then what you're going to do is you're going to join those stitches together, and you're going to work in a round. So say that we've done that, because I'm not going to cast on all those stitches. We're just going to work across here. So I want to show you how we deal with the slubs. And actually I have to knit for quite a ways before I get to the slub. So I'm going to take this out, and I want to get to halfway here. Do my little cast on, my slip knot again, do some cast on. Oh, and the other thing too is when you're working in the round like this, just knit. There's no purling. Some people really don't like to purl very much. So this is a great project for people that just want to knit, not have to think about anything, because it's very, very simple. So, okay, so now I'm going to knit across this. And we don't want to knit with the tail. And if you're wondering why I'm knitting kind of on the funny side, it's because I knit continental. I'll go into that in just a second, because here we are at a slub. So what we're going to do with the slub is, instead of knitting it, because if you notice, these slubs really kind of come out, they're really prominent. To make them prominent, what I do is I change over to purl, and I purl the slub. And if you've ever noticed, if you use a thick and thin yarn, and if you're working in stockinette stitch, which is knit a row, purl a row, you're going to find that a lot of your slubs or even your novelty yarns are going to be more prominent in the wrong side of the garment or the piece that you're working. And quite often that's not what you want to have happen. Oops. There we go. So you can see, well, we can't really see right now because that's actually sitting on the needle. But if we go across on the next row, you'll see that that stitch is going to stand out more. Purl this. So back to the continental knitting, my hand is in my left hand needle, and that's basically what the difference is, as opposed to having my yarn in the right hand and I'm throwing it. Some people think this is really weird looking because it's not what they're used to seeing. But there's nothing weird about it. It still gives you the same effect that American style knitting does. And some people also say that looks like you actually work a little faster. So you can see right now where that slub is towards the front, as opposed in the back, it's not quite so prominent. Now another thing that you can do with this, and I have to knit a little bit to get to another slub, is I have another cowl here that has bobbles. And that's just another way of taking advantage of the slubs in the yarn. So when you get to the slub, instead of purling it, you're going to make a bobble. So I'm just going to knit another row here. And maybe I'll just grab a slub so we'll be a little bit closer to it. And maybe I'll just do another row. So actually, because I'm going back and forth on this, I'm going to knit a row, purl a row. If I were working in the round, I would just be knitting. Oops. And the bamboo part of this yarn just feels so nice and silky. It's a real pleasure to work with it, especially the multicolors, because every time you get to another color, it just makes the knitting that much more fun. And especially like a beginner, this is a great beginner's project. Once you know the knitting, you don't even have to worry about purling yet. Just knit. Okay, so we're going to get to another slub. Now this time, what we're going to do is make a bobble. And so what I'll do is I'll knit a couple of stitches with the slub. Maybe I'll do 2-3 stitches. Then I'm going to turn it around in the middle of this. And I'm going to purl these stitches. And there's all different kinds of ways to make bobbles, different combinations of this. Okay, and now I'm going to turn it back again, so that's 3 stitches. And now what I'm just going to do is I'm going to knit one of the stitches, I'm going to slip one of the stitches, knit the next one, and then I'm going to pass these 2 stitches over. And then I'm going to knit the next stitch, and I'm going to push this out a little bit. So now you can see how I have this nice little bobble. So it really took advantage of that slub that's in the yarn. So 2 ways of dealing with the same yarn, 2 totally different effects. And it's just a matter of what you happen to like or what you happen to want to do. And this would make a really cute scarf too. Just knit it long and put it together. But isn't that cute? A little bobble. Okay. Okay. So that's just one of the things that you can do with a novelty yarn like this. Another thing, if you wanted to do, is just plain old knit. And then basically, you would just get a little less, of that slub sticking out. But that's basically it for the cowl. Oh, and actually this particular cowl, just to show you the difference, if you just put on, say, the 90 or 100 stitches, and you just work round and round, and you make that tube. Well, if you look at this here, you can kind of see that it's wide here, but it's narrower up at the top. That also makes it you can just see that it lays better. If I did it the opposite way, you would see, let's see, I don't think I can make it work that way yet. You know what? Because I did it that way, I can't make it work differently, I guess. It would have to be inside out. That's how I happen to see it. And actually, if you wanted to do the purl side showing, that's even another effect. And that's kind of pretty like that too. And it gives you a different colorway as well. Okay, but I guess that's all we have in time for today. And I will be seeing you again soon with a different knitting technique, and I hope that you're going to be able to follow along with me.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.